Let's move on now to the Philadelphia Eagles free agency review. But before we do that, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, like this video, also ring the bell to get notified when we create new content. This is the last series of free agency for the 2023 offseason before we pivot to previewing the 2023 NFL season. And what that means is a lot more Eagles content. So be sure to ring the bell and subscribe to get notified when we create new content. And Ryan, let's get into it here.
Let's do it.
The Eagles, I already said this and I'll say it again, I think had the best draft in my opinion, getting Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith to start out as well. And then you go and get Keely Ringo and just the Philadelphia Bulldogs, so to say. But then on top of that, though, it's a lot of the key pieces that they lost in the offseason, I think they replaced as well, or at least have brought in youth or key prospects that they have developed to replace guys that they've lost, so to say, such as like Isaac Samalo that they lost, but then they were able to replace them in the left guard position, in my opinion. So then with that being said, though, and with where this team is at, we think they have one of the best leaders in the entire organization, in the entire league, in Jalen Hurts. You're just like, man, this team is just still amazing. This team is just extremely good. I think they had a good free agency, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. And I also think that the Eagles and the Colts were my two top drafts. I had them as a tie. But I think you look at what they lost in free agency. And to be honest, you and I both had that discussion in that video. And it was like, they did lose a decent bit, right? They brought back most of the members of the secondary, but Javon Hargrave left. And that was kind of, I think, the major one. And then they did bring in Nicholas Morrow from the Bears, who played a very large percentage of the snaps. But let's get into their overall roster and start breaking it down. So you look at that receiver room: A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, two-headed monster, right? They added Olamide Zaccheaus this offseason. And then after that, they have some rotational guys. Quez Watkins is probably the most prevalent one. And then I'm going to Dallas Goedert. Mm-hmm. He is their best tight end, and he plays a really big role in that offense as well. And I think you throw him in, and he's a really nice weapon in that receiver room, right? And so all in all, I mean, they have weapons galore. And then I think you throw in DeAndre Swift. They added Rashad Penny as well. And they now have 4 solid running backs and 4 or 5 solid receiving options.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, the receiving options are great. And as a Falcons fan, to Eagles fans, you're going to like Olamide. He's just consistent. I think he provides a little bit more versatility than Quez Watkins. Watkins, to me, in my opinion, is always just a deep threat. While Zaccheaus, he can do some route running over the middle. So I think it even makes your guys' offense a little bit more versatile. Mm-hmm. When it comes to running back, yes, it's great that they got DeAndre Swift, but if we're being completely honest, like, he's going to split snaps with Penny and Scott. The running back there doesn't really matter too much because the additions to me are.
Well, but you're not getting hit until 2.5 yards down the field. You and I could be back there and we'd get average 3.5 a carry at least.
So that's exactly my point. Like, so yes, I mentioned that Isaac Samalo has left. Also, I believe Andre Dillard also left as well. But you have Jordan Mailata there, who they've developed into a good tackle. You have Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens right there, who are good interior offensive line, young interior offensive line as well. And you know what you're getting with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. And so the key is obviously to stay healthy, but I also like Tyler Steen as well. It's just I just don't see any weaknesses on this entire offense, and maybe running back with just injury history, but at the same time, it's running back by committee, and there, they don't need to the Moneyball approach. They don't need someone to come in and run for 1,200 yards like how Miles Sanders did. They just need 2 guys to run for 600 yards. DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny can do that. They both can run for 600 yards this season.
Yeah, and then Jalen Hurts is probably actually, in my opinion, going to be their leading rusher from the quarterback spot. So
he's going to have the most touchdowns for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so to me, the only thing that concerns me about this offense was the loss of Shane Steichen, right? They are transitioning. We saw a slight regression in the Bills last year when Brian Daboll left, and then they brought in their new offensive coordinator. So that, to me, I think is the only thing to worry about. However, I think keeping this offensive line relatively intact and already having these elite this two elite receivers, I think should help them carry over success from 22 to 23. So let's get into their defense here. And I mean, they could not have gotten any luckier in the draft, in my opinion. Jalen Carter falls to them at 9, right? They did make a trade up with the Bears. But then you look, and then Nolan Smith fell to them at 30. And it's like you said, the Philadelphia Dogs, right? They got two extremely important pieces to two-time national championship defense. Jalen Carter arguably being the best prospect of both of those historically good defenses. And then you throw in Keely Ringo. I think he'll make a transition to safety just because his short area quickness is not on par with, I think, some of the receivers. You look at guys like Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams. They would, I think, abuse a guy like Keely Ringo on the outside just because you can't make those same cuts. And then adding an experienced safety in Sidney Brown, I think you would have a really solid safety duo there. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this defense go to work. They averaged a sack, I think, every 10 plays or like 15 plays last year. And I'm going to be curious to see if they can keep that up going into the next season.
That'll be tough. That'll be very impressive. Actually, I did not know that. But
they had I think 67 sacks last year or something.
Jeez, that's insane. So that they did. If there's an area of concern for me, just where some of the losses will impact, it is on the
70 sacks.
Say it again.
They had 70 sacks.
Oh, okay. It's even better. But and I just say that too because, yes, they replaced Javon Hargrave with Jalen Carter, and by all means, if everything works out, he should replace Javon Hargrave and then some. And so, but if there are other things that happen, that'll absolutely be a big hole in that defense as well. And some of the other things as well is they did lose TJ Edwards, but so how's the middle of the field going to work? Obviously, they signed Nicholas Moreau. So just some of those questions, just kind of getting into if everything meshes well, if they fit their system well. But that being said, though, it's overall, I look at this defense and this is probably a top 5 defense. It's I'm thinking of worst case scenario though, and they added great depth all throughout.
Yeah, no, exactly. And to me, anytime you go from a proven commodity to a draft pick, I think there is definitely some concerns, especially when that draft pick is a guy like Jalen Carter who had, let's say, a rocky draft process, to say the least, with the incident that happened in Athens to his pro day, and then just his overall attitude seemingly towards the process itself. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how that translates. But I think you get him in a locker room like this, and you have Nolan Smith, who was rumored to be the locker room motivator at Georgia, right? Keeping guys in line. And then Jalen Hurts, as well. You already mentioned at the beginning of the video, he's one of the best leaders in the entire NFL. So I think he's in a good spot. Overall, I think we should switch into kind of what we think a successful season would look like for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think this is going to be fairly obvious, but it's Super Bowl or bust for them, right? If they're not in Super Bowl contention come January, something went majorly wrong, right? Yeah. And I don't even know what would have to happen. I think you have to look like major injuries at that point. It would be the only thing that I think could really derail this team, right? And then I think competition, the NFC is probably getting a little bit stronger. I think you look at teams like the Seahawks, the Lions, even the Cowboys inside the division. I think those are teams that can start to threaten the Eagles a little bit. However, I still think the Eagles are pretty far ahead of where those teams are at right now.
Yeah, I mean, they should. Right now, I would have them win the division. But even if they don't win the division, there's no reason why they can't go win the Super Bowl. There's no reason why the roster can't go into Detroit, beat them, can't go into Dallas in late January and beat them. So I think that they'll win the division. I don't see why they wouldn't. And then at the same time, if they're not playing the last game of the season, then that's a disappointment for this team. That's why Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox come back, Brandon Graham come back. To become a play.
And that is really hard to do. Like you look at the Cincinnati Bengals in 2021 to 2022, right? Like they made it all the way to the AFC Championship game and then lost a nail biter to Kansas City, right? And I still think if the Eagles do that, I think that is a successful season, right? Because they were in it all the way until the end, right? No, at the end of the day,
Well,
only two
yeah.
teams can make it to the Super Bowl. But like if they're not in the NFC Championship game, or like they get blown out in the NFC Championship game, then I think you got to look at and go back to the drawing board, because Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and I think some of the more veteran group of players are leaving, right? Darius Slay is getting older.
Yeah.
I think they only signed who's the other, James Bradbury, to a 1 or 2 year deal. And so it's like that secondary is going to be moving on a little bit. So they are in much more of a win now mode, but I think you look at some of the pieces that they have, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and I think they're built a little bit more for long-term success, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if you look at the cycle of the Eagles, right? They went to Super Bowl. They won that Super Bowl, and then they extended Carson Wentz. Didn't necessarily work out. And then in that season, an offensive coordinator also went to go be the head coach for the Colts. So there's they say history repeats itself. So Eagles fans are hoping that doesn't happen again. So yeah, but I guess let's go ahead and wrap up the Eagles offseason recap there. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what your favorite offseason edition was. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time.